Good morning, everyone, and happy Mother's Day to all of the mothers out there. It's nice to take time today on a Sunday and honor our mothers who brought us into the world and all the patient forbearance that it takes to be a mother. So my sister has organized a nice little online family gathering today. So a little later this morning, I'll be connecting with my siblings and my mom, which would be nice. And I hope you all have take the same opportunity. It's interesting, as a monk, I feel like I have many mothers. So, um, so many, there's so many women in my life who are kind enough, compassionate enough to look after me. In a sense, when you become a monk, the way the Buddha thought about this and phrased it is you leave your family and you leave the home life for the homeless life. And the Sangha really becomes your family. And, the intimate, and we have to put that in scare quotes in case anyone's just listening. I made scare quotes. The intimate part of your family, of course, is your fellow monks and monastics, but also the lay people sort of play a huge role in our lives by design. The very way the Buddha structured the Sangha is quite amazing. He gives a lot of emphasis to the value of solitude, silence, and simplicity, but he recognizes correctly the true nature of beings and the social side of us, and he sets up a community that really fosters the best of both worlds and fosters the support. We can't just pick up the ideal and run off into the woods. I've seen many people try that. It worked out very well for Ajahn Sona. He has some amazing stories about his years as a lay hermit, but that didn't just come after momentary inspiration in reading a book. He had studied and practiced for years and gradually developed his faith and understanding of the Dhamma before he went off and did that. But most people, even people that have ordained for a few years, are not yet ready. And there's an interesting passage in the sutta where a young monk is all eager to go off and live in solitude. He's totally inspired by the romance of it and the ideal of practicing in solitude. And the Buddha discourages him. And as often happens in the suttas, he asks a second time, and the Buddha says, no, this is not the time. He asks a third time, and then the Buddha says, well, since you've asked for a third time, do as you see fit. So that seems to be some sort of special thing. If you ask the Buddha 3 times, he has a hard time saying no. But the monk goes off into solitude and, in short, has a miserable experience. And he comes back, and then the Buddha doesn't say, I told you so, but kind of explains why it was that he didn't initially accord, with his desire just to go off and practice, and then gives a nice teaching on how one needs to prepare oneself for that. But the society of the Sangha, the community of the Sangha, good friends, is very important. And it's through those associations that I have many wonderful and noble mothers and people playing a nurturing role in my life. So we celebrate Mother's Day. And it is the last day of retreat, which might be a sad note for for many of us who have been enjoying this. I think it's come off amazingly well, and I will be continuing these morning coffee times for the foreseeable future. once we resume alms round, which who knows when that will be, but my guess is it's probably at least a month away at this point. I'll have to reconsider how I structure my mornings. There's a possibility to do something a little earlier, but some people aren't up earlier, so we'll see. We'll see when we come to that stage. But for now, we have one last day of retreat. We had our morning puja earlier. We'll have an evening puja. There's practice through the day, and then there'll be a published question and answer series with Ajahn Sona, I believe, later this afternoon on his YouTube channel. But the retreat that we've had will conclude with the evening puja tonight at 7 p.m. So, and I'd like to use this this gathering we have in the morning because many of you, if not most of you, have been participating in the retreat. So I'd like to use this maybe tomorrow, maybe even Tuesday, just to hear some. How did you find the challenge of practicing at home? I have a bell going for no reason. I don't know why. How did you find this whole sort of setup? I've seen some positive feedback as it's been going on. People saying, more, please, more. Let's do more. And there's a fair amount of work that goes into this, but there's no reason why we couldn't do more in the future. I think for now, myself and the monks here at the Hermitage and Birkin needs a little break. It's been a bit of work doing this for the first time and getting all the supports into place so that it looks and sounds and is reliable as possible in this ephemeral, ever-changing world of technology. So I have a few ideas of other retreats that could be done, even in bringing some other people in to teach retreats. We'll see where that goes. So last night, Ajahn gave his concluding talk for the retreat and was reflecting again on the 5 hindrances and 7 factors of awakening. Spent most of his talk focusing in on that. And both last night and also in the question session and in a previous talk, there was some sort of reference, and all through the retreat, Ajahn has been talking about clarity and lucidity and the lucid mind, the clear mind, the serene mind. And this question of Buddha nature or the original mind, which you don't really find in the Theravada, but in later schools of Buddhism, they pioneer that concept. But this notion of the luminous mind came up, and I was doing a quick internet search just to try to remind myself where that comes up in the suttas, because it's such a beautiful concept, and I think it speaks to us and our conditioning. We long to believe that intrinsically we are pure, the mind is pure. That's a very inspiring notion to us. And I don't think, while there is some instances that the Buddha's pointing to the potential for the mind being pure and clear and undefiled, I don't think the way that we pick that teaching up is always perfectly pure. We're still so much in the grips of identity and seeking identity and wanting to frame our experience through self and identity, that notion that the mind is luminous and pure intrinsically can't help but be tainted by those habits of selfing. And while it feels good, that's a very positive identification, I don't think it squares completely with what the Buddha is pointing at. So, like many of these teachings, one needs to look carefully sometimes and add a little extra nuance to how it is that we receive these teachings. When looking for the reference, though, I found a very interesting resource on Wikipedia, of all places. There is a page on Wikipedia on the luminous mind, and I highly recommend it. I don't know, let's see if I might be able to pop the link. Nope, that's not the right link. Might be able to pop the link in there for people to check out later. But if you just search Wikipedia for luminous mind, there's a really interesting article, probably more than you want to know, but it's structured very nicely. There's references to places in suttas where it's mentioned, and then it talks about how it sits within various traditions, and it points to what's found in the suttas, what's more commentarial. But what I was looking for, I found there, which was a reference to a sutta in the Anguttaras, where we find this passage that is so beautiful and inspiring, and I just thought I'd read it briefly. Luminous, monks, is the mind, and it's freed from incoming defilements. The well-instructed disciple of the noble ones discerns that it is that as it actually is present, which is why I tell you that for the well-instructed disciple of the noble ones, there is development of the mind. So, here, I want to point to sort of the Buddha is, he wraps this up like there is development of the mind. Like this luminous mind can be developed. It's not correct, according to the way the Buddha talks about this in the sutras, to think of it as like this is our true nature, or the luminous mind is Buddha nature. You could say the luminous mind is Buddha nature because if we do the practice correctly and we our mind and conscious experience is transformed, then we experience the mind, the luminous mind that the Buddha experiences. But we aren't born that way. Babies aren't born with luminous minds, and neither are other beings. But that potential does exist there, and that passage is what the Buddha is pointing out, is like the well-instructed disciple of the noble one discerns that as it actually is present, one experiences that. So, when the defilements have been removed, one experiences something that could be called luminous. And Ajahn gave quite a bit of attention to some of the beautiful images and similes that we find in the suttas. And years ago, he and Ajahn Piedamo, who's a German monk of our tradition, and they were the two original inhabitants of Birken 1.0, little shack monastery up in on the Birkenhead River, not far from Whistler. In those early days, they were doing a lot of memorizing of suttas, and there was a focus on the similes because that really enables one to. It's the language of the mind. We think in images and stories. So, if you really want to remember and retain some of these teachings, one would do well to take an interest in the imagery. And it's not casual. The similes and the imagery in the Pali Canon is really wonderful. I think eventually Ajahn Piedamo published a book on the similes, either by himself or with Helmuth Hecker. Can't quite remember, but it's hard to find. We really need a website because this is really one of the most effective ways to connect people and do that mapping that I talked about. Like, this language of imagery speaks really deeply to us. And this notion of the mind like water and how water can be purified. Water gets defiled, but we can say, like in some sort of theoretical way, the water itself is still pure. It's just been commingled or mixed up with impurities that we could then filter out. Sometimes very difficult, maybe even very expensive, labor-intensive process. to get back to a state where we just have pure water, but possible. And that's a great analogy for the mind. There's another passage that I tripped upon in here, though, which some of you will be familiar with. And this had great influence on the forest tradition. One, because it comes from the Venerable Ajahn Puritato, who was regenerated and reinvigorated the forest tradition and in some sense unified. My sort of understanding and take is there's always been forest monks and nuns dating back to the time of the Buddha, but they always lived a little bit on the fringe. And they would kind of come and go. And because they were principally interested in really advancing their practice as far as they could, and not in publishing, most of them we'll never know about. They lived fairly localized, quiet lives devoted to their practice. But we do have this character of Ajahn Mun, who emerges in the early 20th century in Thailand, and he happens to be well connected. One of his childhood friends becomes a very high ecclesiastical monk, the Sangharaja of Thailand. And he develops quite a following, both in Bangkok amongst the royalty, aristocratic people, and also common folk in the north and the northeast of Thailand. And it does coincide with a phase of modernization in Thailand, so it's a little bit easier to know about somebody like an Ajahn Mun. And he's sometimes considered almost like the grandfather of the modern Thai forest tradition, and many of the great forest monks of the last century or so were inspired by him, or direct disciples of him. And Ajahn Chah, although he only had a brief couple-day visit with him, always thought of him as one of his primary teachers because of the influence it had on his practice. So, and Ajahn Mun makes some comments, and there's this beautiful poem even that he wrote called The Ballad of Liberation. But Ajahn Mun sort of made a few comments about the nature of this luminous mind, which had a great effect on people. And so this notion of the Pabhasara Jitta, as it's called in Pali, Pabhasara is like luminous, radiant mind, is something that's very, very much alive in Thai forest monastic circles. And he has a slightly different take on it that's quoted in this Wikipedia article, and I thought I'd just read that as well. So this is Ajahn Mun. The mind is something more radiant than anything else can be, but because counterfeits, passing defilements, come and obscure it, it loses its radiance. Like the sun when obscured by clouds. Don't go thinking that the sun goes after clouds. Instead, the clouds come drifting along and obscure the sun. So meditators, when they know in this manner, should do away with these counterfeits by analyzing them shrewdly. When they develop the mind to the stage of the primal mind, this will mean that all the counterfeits are destroyed, or rather, counterfeit things won't be able to reach into the primal mind, because the bridge making the connection will have been destroyed. Even though the mind may then still have to come into contact with preoccupations of the world, its contact will be like that of a bead of water rolling off a lotus leaf. So, anyways, there's a lot more that could be said about this concept of the luminous mind, and I really encourage everybody to spend a little time, either today or tomorrow or sometime soon, looking at that page and giving particular attention to the discussion on how the concept sits within the Theravadan school. There's a nice little summation of Ajahn Thanissaro and his take on it, and he kind of de-emphasizes this identification as the mind being somehow originally or inherently pure, and points more to sort of, again, the opportunity to experience and cultivate the pure mind through correct practice. So anyways, that's some encouragement along the lines of following up on these teachings of the hindrances. And we talked about mapping them, and I give strong encouragement to look at not just that article, but also look to some of the teachings on the 5 suttas and follow up on Ajahn encouragement to connect with the imagery, especially the imagery of that's there in the teachings on the jhanas, where they're talking about both the effect of the hindrances on the mind. So it talks about the nivarana, the hindrances, and there's these beautiful similes of water that really can help one in this process of like learning to identify and start to become more mindful of how these things are arising in your life. You want to be able to sort of sensitize yourself to the pollutant of what we call greed, or kama tanha, sense desire for sense contact. To the point where you can sense it, you're mindful, you feel it, and its effects on the mind, how it moves the mind, obsesses the mind, deludes the mind, thinking I'd be happy if I had this or that, or if this was not in my sense experience. Anger, and how anger is a great stain, it's a great taint. And I like these similes on water and as they relate to anger, because if you think about how difficult it is for water to be purified and how easy it is for it to be polluted or tainted in some way. And then, the work it takes to get back to a state of purity. When I reflect on that, it arouses the kind of appropriate level of heedfulness in angry states of mind. It's easy for us to kind of tolerate a little frustration, aversion, anger, ill will, especially the more refined occurrences of it. But if you think about it in the way the Buddha talked about it as this stain or this pollutant, you don't have anything to do with it. So it's like at the first dawning of mindfulness and awareness, like that's what's going on. I'm obstructing this beautiful, luminous mind that has access to love and kindness and joy and serenity. I often talk about educating oneself at the full cost of these hindrances and these negative emotions. And the similes and the imagery that's there in the suttas can be very useful. Oh, if I had a team, we could just build a website. Yeah, maybe it exists. Usually, if you think something should exist, it usually does. So maybe I just need to sharpen my Google skills, and maybe somebody's put together a wonderful website sharing a lot of the core imagery of the suttas. But whether it's there or not, it's not too hard to find it, and I encourage people to take some time and take a look. So, all right, well, let's turn to some questions or comments from you all. We're almost out of time. I see a lot of people in here, and a lot of comments have rolled by. I see a very poignant one here from, let's move to this. So Bodhi has shared this in the comments here, and I'm sorry to hear that, Bodhi. My condolences go out to you. It's seems like an especially inconvenient time to have your mother pass when you're on the retreat and approaching Mother's Day. So my heart goes out to you. I hope you're well, and I hope the retreat's been at least something to prepare yourself for the challenges that brings. One of my enduring contemplations around death is it's the inconvenient, and the timing of this seems especially inconvenient. So I hope you're well. I'm sorry for your loss. There's just too many comments here for me to scroll back through. If anyone has some sort of brief question or sharing that they'd like to share, maybe you can pop it in the chat field here. And if not, then maybe we'll just close for the day and reconvene tomorrow morning for morning coffee. Tomorrow I'll be particularly interested to get some feedback from people, and I haven't really pushed the capability to bring people in on Skype so much. I don't want to risk the complication of messing this up during the time of retreat, but maybe starting next week, if people, especially tomorrow, if people want to call in on Skype, then that might be a nice way to briefly kind of share your appreciation for the retreat and share a little feedback, not just with me, but all the people that are gathering here each morning. It'd be really nice to hear what worked, what didn't work, so that if we do this again, we can learn from that. So, all right. Well, let's see. Oh, we have one question here. Before we go. Have to move this one up. Hi, Ajahn Sudanto. Ajahn Sudanto instructs the raising of joy during breath meditation. Is this common in the Theravada instruction? I'm having difficulty with it. It's common in the circles I run in. You might find some teachers that just believe that you shouldn't seek that out, but I've experimented with this, and I think it's a very skillful thing to do to induce a sense of joy in the meditation. I did all kinds of experiments trying to see how far you could take it, especially when in my early practice, when I was trying to investigate the difference between joy and happiness, piti, sukha. And they're very close twins, so it's a little bit difficult to completely disentangle them. But I did have the sense and the experience many times that joy is this more energetic form of gladness, happiness, and it is an impediment to deeper states of serenity. So it's positive. It's something that you want to induce. It has a role in the path of cultivating serenity, but there's a cost to it. There's like an agitating nature that's obscuring a more settled, tranquil, serene state of mind. So okay, well, we're approaching 8:30, so we'll leave this at this for today, and hope to see you all tomorrow. And I hope you've had a wonderful retreat. And I look forward either tomorrow or in other ways where we meet, hearing how it went for people. So thank you all. Have a good Mother's Day. Whether you're serious about your retreat or not, don't neglect your mom today. Reach out and share some loving kindness with her. And we'll see you tomorrow morning. Good day.